What's going on, guys? I'm back with another video today and I'm feeling refreshed and rejuvenated and kind of like re-inspired simply because I got out and shot some photos the other day. And if you didn't see that video, it's up here somewhere. On that video, I did something stupid. I'm gonna rewind the footage so you can check that out. I'm really embarrassed right now because I just did something super stupid. I had a spot on my sensor on my R, and for some reason in my head I thought it was a good idea to try to blow the spot off, and now I spit all over my sensor. Yeah, I accidentally spit on my camera sensor. But I wasn't that bothered by it at the time because I have a really good backup camera, the Canon RP. And on today's video, I want to kind of do like a year in review of that camera because I've had the Canon RP now for a little over a year. And in my opinion, it might be the best value camera, period. I mean, it's a full frame camera for about $1,000. You guys probably know I'm not much of a specs guy. I'm much more of the type of person that where I like to tell you how it feels in the field. So that's kind of how I'm going to focus this review. But I am going to talk about specs and kind of how that affects things out in the field. The first thing is, this is the Canon RP. I have a 15-35 on it. This is actually Jody's because the Canon RP is filming this as well. It is so freaking light, it's unbelievable. And for me, that was the best thing. With the battery included, no lens, it's less than half a kilo. And for a full frame camera, that's just incredible. So I've always kind of used it primarily as my B-roll camera, but I do use it to take stills. In fact, the stills on it are so good that sometimes I just use it because it's the one in my hand rather than going, oh, that's my video camera and the R is my stills camera. I just take pictures on whatever one's in my hand with the right lens on it. But it has primarily been my B-roll camera, so I haven't taken as many photos on it as, say, my R. Stills wise, it has a 26.2 megapixel sensor, and that's totally fine. In my opinion, that's kind of actually the sweet spot of the megapixel count. If you go too high, you kind of have too high of a megapixel density, and then anything under 18, you kind of limit your ability to print and blow up things. So 26 to me is a sweet point. The autofocus capabilities of the RP. I'll start off by saying it has the dual CMOS technology by Canon, which is how you get that really smooth video transition, and that is beautiful. Anytime I use any other brand's camera, I never feel like the autofocus transition is as smooth as the dual pixel CMOS. But what I will say is from a stills perspective, when the camera first came out, it took a little bit of time to find like a human face. So if I was taking a picture of somebody walking down the street, it would sometimes take a couple seconds to pick up their face and grab focus on them. But over the past couple months, I guess maybe even 6 months ago, they did an update to the firmware and it has sped that up a lot. I have noticed it's definitely better now. So it's no longer the issue it was at the time. I learned the joys of manual focus peaking, especially for wildlife photography. There is manual focus peaking on the camera. It does like red, yellow, or blue, which means that if you're in manual focus, it'll basically light everything up in that color. And I want to show you the manual focus peaking the best I can because it's kind of hard to show it with a beanbag setup. Actually, let me flip the camera around so you can see the back of my EOS R. So you can see this blue line on the back of my camera. That blue line's right on this squirrel, which says that the squirrel's in focus. And that doesn't seem like a very important thing unless you're shooting wildlife or street photography or something and you have a lot of foreground elements or faces or things that the autofocus might choose to grab rather than the subject you want, and then it's a total game changer. So the manual focus peaking works amazingly on the RP. I'm really happy with that. But speaking of kind of like wildlife photography, which is where you use the manual focus peaking a lot, I will say that the 5 frames per second photo that the RP does really isn't enough. I did test out using the RP in the field in the Amazon with Morton Hilmer, you might remember.
When you're only counting time to the cloud.
And there was definitely a couple instances where like a bird in flight or a monkey running around, and I kind of just missed that moment between. It would like catch this moment and this moment and this moment, but the one I really wanted was this moment or this moment. And so 5 frames per second for wildlife photography, really, it just doesn't cut it. In my opinion, the RP is best as a landscape photography or nature camera body. That's where it is at its best for sure. Now, there was a lot of criticisms about the RP when it came out. The biggest one was the dynamic range, and people love jumping all over dynamic range. And the reason that it was criticized on this camera is because it's the same sensor as the Canon 6D Mark II, which of course just got destroyed by the tech people about the low dynamic range on it. On my side, I have never ever noticed a dynamic range issue on this camera. And that might be because I use filters quite a bit, so it kind of harnesses that dynamic range, but it definitely isn't something that's visibly noticeable to me. To the tech people, it's definitely not on the lines of like the Sony A7R III, which has crazy dynamic range, but it's good enough for use. It's definitely not something that I would be concerned with.
Going somewhere new.
Another criticism of this camera was the weather sealing. It is not weather sealed, unlike the R. And it is actually something I noticed right away. When we were in Singapore, when we'd first gotten the camera, I took the RP and the R out. Both had lenses on them, and we went from our air-conditioned hotel, and immediately the RP's sensor steamed up. The condensation showed and you couldn't take a picture. But on the R, which was weather sealed, only the front element of the lens steamed up. It showed that the R was really, really airtight sealed, whereas the RP wasn't. That being said, out in the field, I've had absolutely no issues with, using the RP in bad weather. I've taken it out in the rain, I've taken it out in the snow, I've dropped it into a creek. Actually, I didn't drop it. Mike Perea kicked it into a creek. So Mike's here, and he's doing his best to murder my gear. I set my camera vicariously on a ledge, and it just tumbled straight down into the water. But, when you buy Canon gear, you know it's gonna be fine. It wasn't my fault, but it was all totally fine. So it does a better job of weather sealing than I think it gets credit for. Another huge criticism of the RP was the 4K is cropped. And for me, that's not been an issue because I don't film in 4K. In fact, for me, it's actually been an advantage. Yes, we would all like to see uncropped 4K, but there is an advantage to cropped 4K. For example, I shoot all the vlogs in 1080p. I can throw on 4K, which is cropped, so it looks even more zoomed. So all of a sudden, I don't know what the 4K crop is on this camera. Let's say 1.5, for example. All of a sudden, that 4K becomes 600. But then it's 4K, so I can actually zoom in to 2 times, making it about 1200 millimeters. Meaning up here, I can spy on the people down there. Meaning if you've got a cheating spouse or partner, you can use that 4K to find out if they're cheating from a long ways away. So for me, the crop factor of the 4K has actually been an advantage. That being said, if you're looking to vlog in 4K, it's not ideal unless you have an ultra wide lens like a 15mm or something like that, so that when you're filming yourself, you're not just scrunched up on your face. Next criticism was the battery life. The battery, there's no battery in this camera. The battery is the LPE17. I will say that I go through batteries way more often than I would like. With the R, I can go a day or 2 days without changing batteries without a problem. With this one, if I'm out filming, I definitely have to change at some point in the day. There's days I can get through an entire day without changing batteries, but for the most part, I at least have to have one battery with me extra. I wish the battery was better and stronger and lasted longer, but at the same time, it's nice that it doesn't weigh anything. I mean, some things that I think that the Canon RP is missing. The first thing that drives me crazy is the lack of a true intervalometer. Yes, you can go into the settings and you can do like video time lapse. The camera takes a video frame every 2 seconds and then it stitches itself automatically into a beautiful time lapse video. And those time lapses come out really nice, as you'll see from the footage that I'm showing you right now over top of this. These are all time lapses done directly in camera on the Canon EOS RP. But what you can't do, which I don't know why you can't do other than Canon dropping the usual cripple hammer, is take stills. And for the camera to save those stills. If you want like time-lapse footage from photos, you need an actual cable release. So that's really annoying. Canon, don't do that anymore. There's also not Canon Log video footage on the EOS RP. And for me, that's not an issue. You might remember when I got the Canon EOS R, I was really stoked about having Canon Log and being able to, you know, play with color grading and stuff like that. And then after like a week, I realized Canon's color profiles are better than I can color grade, so what's the point of color grading? So I don't have any issue with there not being Canon Log on the EOS RP. But people that are trying to do more professional filmmaking might be. The one thing that I am missing on the RP is 120 frames per second. Yes, the Canon EOS RP does 1080p 60 frames per second, which you can slow down into pretty nice slow-mo. But ever since I stopped using the Sony a6300 like 4 years ago, I've missed 120 frames per second. It's so nice to get that really buttery 120 frames per second footage in slow-mo.
Open for you. And the stars, they all turn blue. Let them
I guess my final review is this, and I think this is pretty telling. Canon is releasing the Canon R5 at some point in the summer, we believe, and I will be getting that camera. And it doesn't make sense for me to have 3 cameras, the RP, the R5, and my Canon R. And you would think that the camera I was going to get rid of would be the RP, but it's not. The camera that I'm going to get rid of is probably actually the R, because the RP isn't that much worse than the R, and it is quite a bit lighter. It actually maybe makes a better backup still camera than the R because it is smaller, because it's lighter, and because it's cheaper. If something happens to it, it's easier to replace. It's about half the price of the R. I think that Canon will stop producing Canon EOS Rs because I don't see a need with the R5 and the R6 coming up. It just doesn't seem like it's necessary, but I do think and really hope that Canon continues to update the RP line. I'd love to see a Canon EOS RP that does 120 frames per second and has a proper intervalometer, for example. If Canon does that, I will definitely be getting that camera as well. The Canon RP, they say that the P stands for popular, and I do think that that's exactly what this is. It's a Canon camera for the people. It's a camera that anybody can use. And that has a lot of value for basically everybody. Professionals, fairly new photographers, and people that are trying to make the jump from crop sensor cameras to full frame cameras. It's a camera for the people. And that's it for today's video. I'm out in the field shooting some photography again on Sunday, so I'll see you there. Peace.